start by asking you both to introduce yourselves and give a bit of a background as to how you got into music and also the business side of your career from the beginning. Do you want to go first, Melissa?
Sure. So I'm from Toronto, Canada, originally. I moved to England just over a year ago now. I've been doing music, I guess, for about 10 years. Started off, I got lucky and I met a producer right after I decided to do music, and who made my first album. And that was when I was about 18, and that album did moderately well in Germany, which led to a tour there. And at that point I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make it for sure. This is really easy so far. Long story short, I've been signed to a label, I've been not signed to a label. I've been a backup singer. I've considered quitting music pretty much once a year, every year of my career. I just released my fourth album back in November after moving to a different territory and dealing with an entirely different market that I haven't been used to. But I've been focusing on the UK market as well as Canada for this particular release. And that brings me up to today, speaking at a conference for my very first time, so thank you for assuming I'm qualified to do this. Oh, I was on The Voice in Quebec, which nobody actually knows about outside of Quebec. It's a very isolated music market, which I've been fortunate to actually do quite well in. It's very self-sustaining and very supportive if you're in there. And so yeah, I did The Voice in Quebec, and I basically learned French on this, during the filming of it, because it's all in French. So we can get into that a bit later. I think we might talk about that. That's weird.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, hi, my name's Sam Lee. So I've been in music for about 11 years, and when I say in music, not necessarily working professionally, I discovered that my journey was in music when I was about 25 years old. I came from a background of going through art school. I trained as a dancer and as a wilderness survival teacher as well, so which actually still plays a big part in my life, working within the natural environment. But around 25 years old, having no training in music whatsoever, I discovered folk music and traditional song from the British Isles through the means of American old-time blues folk traditions there, and realizing that there was an indigenous music in the UK, and fell in love with folk songs and thought, well, hey, I'll learn a few, and then started singing and realizing that I had a singing voice, and that was really my purpose. But going on that journey, before I started becoming a professional musician, I actually realized that 11 years ago, there was really no folk scene whatsoever. There were a few old people who gathered in dusty bars to sing old songs, top of pubs on Tuesday nights, but there was no sort of young persons gathering, listening to acoustic, folk, traditional stuff that I could see in London where I lived. And so I set up a music night called what was then the Magpie's Nest, is now the Nest Collective, which was then a monthly gathering of bringing folk musicians from all around. And that's, over that time, has grown into quite a large organisation. So as well as being a singer, I'm a promoter, and the Nest Collective puts on 120 shows a year in London and curates festival stages around the country. And we have lots of artist training programmes and experiences of bringing music, folk music, world music, all sorts of acoustic styles, to audiences in unusual ways, often in unusual settings, dispensing of PAs and that sort of thing. But as a singer, I sort of did lots of programming, got very involved in the folk scene. I became a song collector and had an ethnographic life, and still do, of going out and working with the Gypsy Traveller community and recording the last singers in the oral tradition of that very much underrepresented community, and documenting their oral traditions. And then from that material that I gleaned, released the first album. Really know nothing about how to make albums or being a professional musician. And very quickly after that being released, that received a nomination for a Mercury Award, which sort of kick-started a career as such. And from there have been a touring musician, and I've recorded 2 albums, and all the time, as well as being a performer and a collaborator and a singer in different projects, I've also worked very holistically in trying to maintain and grow a scene of folk music around Britain and even abroad, and trying to raise and grow an audience to listen to a music form, which is doing very well 10 years later. Is incredible seeing what's happened to whatever you call folk music nowadays compared to when I first started. So that's a sort of rough trajectory of my career.
So I want to start off with talking about what the realities are of being a working musician today. Where does your money come from and go? Are you both able to sustain a full-time living from music?
Most of my income comes from gigging. I don't sustain my full-time living just from music. I work part-time at a gym, and I work at like 6 a.m. a few times a week. So, it's a different story back in Toronto where I was relatively established. I had very regular gigs. So I'm just starting, over the past year, it's obviously improved a lot. I've gotten a lot busier here, or in England. I tend, I've made a decent profit from selling CDs off of the stage, actually, over the years, which is kind of cool. My income, I get a small income based on royalties for like radio play and streaming and online downloads and that kind of thing. So definitely live performances is the majority of my income.
How about you, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, like all artists, it's feast and famine, and go through periods of where I'm earning a lot. I have like a lot of artists I know, and particularly within the world of acoustic musicians, I have a sort of drip sort of income streams coming from all sorts of, from the digital environment, from the live, I work a lot as a curator, programming, advising, so the money that I earn comes from so many different places, and like a lot of my colleagues, we have to be entrepreneurial and very adaptable to the environments we traverse, and there is no one place very rarely are there musicians who derive their income from particular one scene. That's when you get to a bigger level. So I think one of the things I've learned to do, and I probably learned this in art school, was just to be a bit of a jack of all trades and be very opportunistic and very kind of good at seeing where places that I could involve myself. And that's partly by using the word yes a lot. I can do that.
Yeah. and then figure it out later.
Exactly. And under the principle that by the time they find out you know nothing about it, you generally know something about it.
Like this right now.
Exactly. I'm learning as I'm going. I'm making it up as I go.
Talking about me. No, you're doing really well.
So like all, it's about trying to find ways of working, but then also at times where you need to be creative, not stopping working, and actually trying to store up reserve so that you can go into creative cycles. And I'm at the end of almost 2 years since I released my last record, and I've squeezed as much out of that record as I possibly can, and everyone's saying, get on with it. Stop touring, stop working, you've got to make some music, which is hard because I enjoy coming to places like this, and this is all part of the career progression, I guess, as I'm sure you all feel.
So putting live and all of your other income streams aside for a moment, you mentioned streaming there, Melissa. Spotify's been criticised for not paying musicians enough. Some say it's record labels who are not sharing profits equally, and licensing costs paid to labels is why Spotify's yet to turn a profit. What's both of your experience of payouts from streaming services? Is the idea of earning money from recorded music a dated concept?
So I have a distribution deal for my music, so I can go onto the back end of that on the website and literally see the breakdown for exactly how much I make per stream of my songs. And it's bleak. You have to be getting hundreds of thousands of streams, I think, to make it like a viable part of your revenue stream. I don't think it's going to be your sole revenue stream. For example, I think over the course of just under a year, I think from my royalties online, which is like a few thousand streams and some album downloads and track downloads. It's like $129 type thing. So it's great when you could, like, I love selling CDs at shows, which happens less and less, but that could be an actual income stream.
Yeah, I am my own label. It was the best decision I made, was to self-release. It was the only decision to make at first, and then it became the better decision. And so I benefit a little bit better. I don't know what my exact stats are. I know that royalties that come through PRS and things are good. And in the international work, because I fall into the world music sort of arena, so I'm collecting societies internationally I benefit from, but from Spotify, no, it's negligible. I don't see that as something that's going to help me record the next album at all. But then I think that is a given for most artists.
Yeah, I don't feel like we even think of it that way now. We're not thinking, we're going to make money on Spotify.
No, but I think the important thing is how you can use services like that to, for information, for metrics that come from that, to try and derive as much knowledge to help guide your career. Not your music, though. Not your music. Your music should always stay integral to what you want to say. But actually, yeah. But though for me, Spotify is also a wonderful resource as somebody. I have a radio show on Tuesdays on Resonance FM in London. And Spotify is wonderful for being able to curate and program, and also for booking artists as well. It's a wonderful. So it's a powerful weapon that gives as it takes, I guess, in that respect. I don't want to slander it. Spotify isn't a profitable company, as we know. Yet, if you look at the amount of people that listen to one of your songs, if it gets played on Radio 2. Or Radio 3 is probably the radio station that I get played on more. Actually, for the £80 or something, or 60 quid that you get per play, for the amount of listens that actually in some way Spotify isn't, the comparisons there are interesting. Though I'm not a mathematician with these. Maybe there are people in this room who are better at being Chris, help me out here. So, yeah.
And what about income from iTunes and physical? Do you still see that? Yeah,
sure. I do sell a fair bit on iTunes. I mean, if there was one devil in this industry, that it is Apple, and I think that's really the real blood draining, life-sucking institution there is. If I can be...
Quote.
Yeah, there goes my career.
Why? What makes you say that?
Well, because I see the sort of profits they're making, where the investment goes back into music. And I see that the ecosystem that is the music industry, the importance of fostering new talent. I mean, today's whole show has been so fascinating, but particularly looking at the successful artists, which is a very small percentage, looking at where success can really go and fly. But, the bottom of that pyramid are thousands and thousands of artists creating amazing stuff, doing everything they can with great hopes and an enormous talent, who, for one reason or another, are not meeting the managers and not meeting the people in this room or in other rooms and having those opportunities. And I think where you see other possibilities of support for that, I'm very into the sort of, the supporting of new generations of music. It's very important, very much in this country, because we're the biggest, music is our huge export. So the investment into new musicians is vital, and it's happening great in certain areas, but in terms of where the money's going out of the system and where it's coming into the system, it's just not fair. Am I right? Do you agree with that, or am I got it terribly wrong? Nod or shake your heads. You're just gonna stay quiet. I'll take the rap for this one.
Would either of you ever accept a check for your music to be exclusive to one streaming service?
I feel like if I was at the point in my career where they're actually offering me that check, I'm probably a bit in demand, and I would say no. Because while I've gone on Spotify and like a couple albums I want to listen to aren't on it, which as a fan and consumer, I wouldn't want to alienate those people. So I guess somebody said earlier, it's, long term as opposed to like the kind of short short-term gain could potentially be more beneficial. So, but I say that now, but there's not a check in front of me. So if I was like right now, because I need money, I'd be like, yeah, sure. What else do you want?
How about you, Sam?
I've taken checks for a few things in my life. Some shall remain nameless. I think I'd take a check to not be on a streaming service.
and then okay.
I don't know. No, I wouldn't. No, I think it's important. If you're going to put it out there, if it's going to be available, it's available. I think that's sort of. I believe in an egalitarian system that if your music is going to be available, it should be as available as many places. And I'm interested in people finding my music.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I want people to find music because I want them to like it, but I also want them to get into folk music. I feel like I'm a channel into a scene and a musical genre that is, being discovered. So no, I wouldn't want to cut off a potential river of interest because people have loyalties in different territories to certain systems.
And then I guess you just focus on making income in other areas.
Absolutely, and that's part of the dance is to find out what those areas are, work out what your role is. Streaming services are great. There are lots of amazing online systems and back ends of Spotify, and I've just discovered Chartmetric, this online service that does such incredible detailed looks at the demographics and the geographics of where your music is being playlisted, and there's so much knowledge to be derived from all these systems that to I guess going back to focus on just one would leave you much poorer if you want to take advantage of some of that knowledge. For some artists, it's absolutely vital that they know exactly where their audience and listenership is, because it might be quite a specific but enormous group of people. So I think it's very important to be paying attention to that information if possible.
Mm-hmm. So here's a hypothetical scenario. Say Spotify or Apple Music said instead of paying you royalties, they'd put your singles on their most popular playlists and give you homepage promotion for album releases, then help you plot tours using location data and sell tickets by sending marketing emails for tour announcements and ticket sales to your fans, therefore helping to grow your live business exponentially, the income of which you would get to keep after costs. Would you be interested? What do you think about that?
Well, it's basic business, really. How much do you earn from this income, and how much would that knowledge cost if you were to buy it from a specialist service or pay people to go and do that dog work for you? So someone like me, probably a really good deal. Yeah, I mean, it depends what they're offering. I suspect there's probably different packages for different artists. Everything is monetized. That's the day we live, the world we live in. Every bit of data has a price on it. Every listener has a value. Every Facebook page has a value. So it's about knowing what your accumulated worth is, and finding ways of increasing that to make that sort of that sort of thing possible. I guess would be my answer.
Yeah. I guess like at this stage in like my career, exposure would be more valuable than the pennies that I'm making on royalties. So at this point, like since I don't have a label to do that for me, I would be outsourcing those third parties to do that work for me that I'd have to pay for. That would cost more than the royalties I'd make off Spotify. I would take the deal.
And obviously we sell our records live. That's where I make most of my my real money from CDs. So if they're gonna not keep that bit of income and give us knowledge,
it's like a better label deal.
Absolutely, and I'd sell the really good albums live and the crap ones on iTunes.
They'd find you out. Can you see that kind of thing happening in future?
That is a good question, because I think there will always be entrepreneurial ways of people seeing how they can squeeze more money out of artists. No one in this room, of course, but they will, or ways of creating services. It's all about about seeing how there can be new models of promoting careers. It's like Yeah, I mean, I think if there's exploitation at its heart, it hopefully won't last. I think the industry is too robust and savvy at seeing where those sorts of things are happening. I don't know what the stop checks are. It's something that should probably be questioned. I'm on the board at the Featured Artists Coalition, and that's all about putting the artist's interests at heart. And I think one of the things is about where exploitation does come in, and but also it's amazing how artists get used to the struggle and the conditions that we have to work in.
Yeah, people are adaptable. So do either of you now use data to plot tours and sell music?
Just recently, since I discovered how to actually use my distributor's website, where I can check out who's buying my music and stuff, I've just started to think about it a bit more. And also last year's conference here was data, and I was okay, I'll look into that. So, because that's not where my mindset lies. It's not where I like to spend my time as an artist. It's a necessity, really, I guess, as a DIY artist. And I think it can be really valuable, especially if, like you said, you discover you have this, maybe obscure fan base that's in a place you wouldn't have thought of, but they're really consuming your music at, high levels, and that's obviously where you should be going to play.
The short answer is no, because the touring circuits that I do are a lot of art centres, there are a lot of festivals, there are a lot of international work where there's a whole different financial system and you get paid brilliantly out in Europe. But interestingly, the one example where I have done it and it's worked was an account of doing a Dutch TV show in Bimhouse just next door. And that had a really enormous impact on sales, but also Spotify listens that drove Holland right up, the Netherlands right up, and the Benelux area. And subsequent to that, I have done 2 tours in the Benelux region that did very well. And that was, I think, very much on account of one instance that then had a knock-on dominoes effect into some of the looking at where the listenerships were. So I think that data did come into some of the regional touring partners and agents at plotting where to go. But also it's about where it's all very well saying I've got lots of listening there, but it's about finding the promoters. Who's going to be the right promoter? And I think that's really important. It's about that. It's all very well having the numbers and the figures and the maps and the grey areas and the red areas, but actually it's about having the people in place to go and do it. And some of my most successful gigs have been in parts of, let's say, of the UK, where there's just been an amazing promoter that's developed a really wonderful community. Let's take somewhere like Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, and they've got an amazing live scene for such a small place, and they get amazing acts coming through the trades club, and that's, I think, more important for artists often, because that's where you're going to have a turnout to your developing a listenership.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that, Melissa? Focus on local and build a listenership that way?
Yeah, I guess especially if you don't have the resources to tour, you don't have much of a choice. Now I'm living in Devon, of all places in England. And so Exeter is kind of where I've started to build my following there. And it is true. If you play good gigs, I got a really good gig the other week, opening for this great Canadian artist, and the promoter, like you said, did a great job on it. And the artist also had a not huge following over there, but there was still a full room, and I was able to gain fans from that. But unfortunately, a lot of the gigs I do is in pubs and in restaurants where people aren't there to listen to music. So it's hard to find the gigs where you're playing original music that are going to be either pay you anything or be worthwhile. There's sometimes it's just you're just playing a gig to play your own music, but you're kind of just there to hear yourself play it. So it's more disheartening sometimes than it is beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And just jumping back to streaming a little bit, have either of you had a track placed on a streaming playlist that wasn't curated by you?
Yes. I did a little UK campaign for my latest album, and I used a playlist promotions company who did some Spotify promotion basically for my songs, and one of the songs got placed on a playlist, and like immediately I saw a bit of a spike in followers and like daily listeners or monthly listeners. So if that could happen all the time, that would be awesome. But yeah, it's tough. It's like through this whole campaign, it was like a good long campaign with this company. I just got the one placement. So it's not easy to do, even if you're, kind of paying a service to do it for you.
There is a definite lack in well-curated playlists within the folk traditional world, and certainly more in the more peripheral areas of the alternative scene that isn't necessarily the Radio 2 folk show friendly stuff. But and so there hasn't been that many playlists. But I do have one kind of hilariously good story, which is that I got somehow put onto, well, probably by him, onto Guy Ritchie's playlist, and he's really into his folk music. And subsequent to that, I've then now become the musical advisor and the singer on his next film, which comes out in May, which is the King Arthur and the Legend of the Sword. So it's from that one Spotify playlist, it's sort of gone into me being incorporated into this movie. So it's not had a huge amount of listens, that playlist, but it's all about who's listening, and that's the important thing, because everybody is out there dipping in. You never know what's being heard. Every play counts. It's not always about numbers. It's about the right people to listen to your stuff, I'd say. And
are those opportunities things that you're going to be seeking out again in future?
You can't always seek them out. Yeah. They have to find you, and that's
Can you just like give Guy Ritchie my link?
For sure, he really likes folk music. So if you want to, jump, get into folk music. Yeah. To learn a folk song, they're so easy. It's about that's it, and the work of the artist is about getting yourself out as many places as possible, and it's often about just putting the hours in.
Brand partnerships are no longer simply about a sync. There's a growing number of technology companies using artificial intelligence and virtual reality to create collaborative campaigns with labels and artists. Can you see those kind of projects becoming a key income stream for music in future? Like sponsored EPs?
The whole virtual reality thing is like a whole new concept to me. I learned a lot in today's panel. So I'm really glad I saw that before we got asked this question. I don't know. It seems like it could be great, like an additional income stream, and something, I guess, that keeps you relevant if that's going to be the new norm. I guess we like every other industry and everybody else in any industry have to just like keep up with what's going on. You said you had lots of answers for this, so oh, maybe that was the other one. Oh.
You're not allowed to tell them we've heard the questions already. My answer to that is the sort of call me old-fashioned, but sitting around a campfire listening to a storyteller is really, for me, much more wonderful than the virtual reality world. One day, the virtual reality will outwit the best of storytellers, or it will become the storytelling of our generation, as it already is. And I just like the smell of wood smoke too much. There's your next challenge, you VR makers. Yes, of course it is. It's not going to take over every music genre. I think we're going to live in a musical kind of ecosystem where everything exists together, and more the merrier. I embrace VR and the things it can do. When recording the Guy Ritchie piece, we did it in Abbey Road. It was great. I never thought I'd record in Abbey Road. What does Abbey Road get used for? Never does it get used for albums. Very rarely for film soundtracks. It gets used for music for game shows. That's the majority of their work that they do. So it's incredible seeing where the finances are coming. So if they're an industry that are going to start to support artists, great. And if there's ways of, that the VR world can move more into the alternative music arenas, maybe there's really exciting things. It's already happening in contemporary performance and art and shows where that sort of technology is being integrated within theatrical immersive experiences. So it's happening on the kind of performative level. Why should it not happen on some of the more traditional music experiences? And I think maybe there's a great potential for that.
Mm-hmm. Just want to check what time we're on. I know we've only got half an hour. Yeah.
Oh, they'll tell us. They'll get the big hook out.
It's already 6. So, does life as a musician get easier or harder for you both in the future?
I really like to think it gets easier, or else, oh man. Um, um, I can't even say if it's gotten easier or harder throughout the last 5 years, because my perspective has changed so much. I've gone from this like starry-eyed, young girl thinking I'm gonna be famous in like 2 years to like, okay, no, this is actually like the real deal, and it's gonna be years of just hard work. But I think that if it's hard doing it on your own as a DIY artist. I think if I had a bit more of a team in place, maybe that would make my life as an artist a bit easier if I could delegate things a bit more and not have to do so much of it myself. I'm just going to go with yes, it's going to get easier. I'm going to put it out there.
Was the question, was live music, playing live going to get easier?
No, so life as a musician.
Life as a musician.
Is that going to get easier or harder for you in the future?
It depends on so many things, and I think the political climate cannot be ignored at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen to live music with dreaded Brexit? It's very interesting. Arts funding has been cut tremendously for live arts, though yet the Arts Council Touring Fund has not been applied to enough, and artists need to know about that. We're looking at PRS Foundation Momentum Fund, I think, is being lost fairly soon because of the closing of that income stream. Yet Canada, as of 1st of April, $80 million more.
I'm going back.
I'm coming with you. And it's not just for Canadian artists, it's for international artists to come and play in Canada. So you look at Scandinavia, where no artist is ever denied touring support. Ever. It just never happens unless they really mess up their application. So we live in a funded environment where it's really looking slightly bleak in some ways for a lot of musicians who rely upon the support of Arts Council, PRSF, Help Musicians UK, those sorts of institutions to allow us to take the risks and do the things we need to in the career. So I'm not saying I'm pessimistic, but I think what needs to be encouraged is a culture of mutual support. Experiences like this, opportunities like this are brilliant to educate artists into how to do the right things, because actually where the hardship is the misexpenditure of energy in things that aren't helping your career develop. So what I see getting easier is where all the ideas and technologies that are happening get to a point where everything's still changing, gets to a point where this is how you do it as an artist, and these are the tools you have to learn. And you don't have to be a brain scientist to do it, and the really crazy creatives who can't work a computer can also do it. So I feel like technology, like in a lot of places in this world, will come and save where the hardship is. But I also think there's an enormous amount of work that needs to be done to developing the audience, and particularly the British audience, because as a listenership, we're, compared to Europe, we're not as loyal. We don't part with our pound as easily on live shows, and that's where it is. So I think what we need to start investing in is the encouragement for people to go and hear live music, take risks, supporting artists earlier on in their career, and venues and promoters and that sort of thing, because you create the platform, you create the artist. That's always been my philosophy with the Nest Collective. So we really have a duty to be working down on the grassroots level as much as possible.
Would you like to see support from anywhere in particular in future, Melissa?
I'm kind of on the same page with from the audience, and on a small level, just from venues and places that are trying to book you for dirt cheap. It makes it even tougher. It's really hard to get people out of their houses these days to come see live music. But it's hard to say oh, you guys should be more supportive of my music that you don't know. So on a big level, I don't know, like you said, Canada does have a really good scheme. I was lucky to get funding for my last album to make the album and to market it. So, no complaints there. But I can't think of an overall who should be more supportive. I'd love it if a label would be more supportive of me personally. But there's so many artists out there, I feel like it's hard to put some kind of big generalization on it.
What do you think the role of record labels will be in future?
There's so many different versions of a record deal these days. I feel like so many different alternatives to having a label. I don't know. This is a question for a label person. We'll need them. I think we'll need them for a while. Or I guess I don't have one right now. Do I need one? Probably. Just the resources that they can offer. How will their role change? I don't know. You guys?
They will keep rolling.
Yeah, they'll find a way.
They'll always be there. It's, you know, yes, I'm not in a position of expertise to answer this, but I think we're reaching a point where the change is not going to be quite as massive as it has been, perhaps. Who knows what curveball is around the corner? But I think I think the DIY cottage industry of doing your own label is getting easier and easier, particularly with label services, and a lot of people I see working in the industry going in to support artists in, you know, setting up a record so that you're earning as much from it as you possibly can. Because the worst thing is to self-release and make an amazing record and not have it registered and, you know, or logged in and not benefiting from its potential. So record labels are diversifying in all the ways that they are a label, where that label is stuck, what that means. And there'll always be major labels and there'll always be the homegrown stuff. And I think what we're going to start to see is the, you know, independent musician realm growing and growing and growing, and more big artists developing, keeping control of their own brand name. And if anything, what I will say, where investment should be coming from and support, both financially and perhaps also mentoring-wise, should be from the artists themselves and the successes. It's all very well doing brilliantly in music and making your fortunes and having the big success, but I think artists always have to recognise where they've came from and be looking to, you know, be mentors, be teachers, and be supporters of those behind them, because, yeah, it's a bleak picture without that possibility. And there are too many artists who can't afford to make music because they haven't had the lucky strikes at the start, who are not going forward. It's becoming too much, as I said in our pre-chat, the reserve of the privileged, who can afford to take the risk to start as an artist in the first place. Yeah. So I think it's really important that the artists who are making success from their work are, you know, and there are many great examples of that happening.
Yeah. Do we have time for questions? Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you very much. That was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.